Hi, my name is Greg Giordano from the band Prechorus, and I'm going to teach you the next tune on Dream Theater's first record, When Dream and Day Unite, the ones who help to set the sun. So, if you like what you hear, please subscribe, check out my band Prechorus. You also might like it as a prog head. So, the second to last tune on the first record, we're going to start off with a whole bunch of getting in and out of a car and noises like that. Which is interesting because it's very similar to some of the sound effects on Scenes from Memory, but that's not what you're here for. You know how to get in and out of a car, hopefully. So we're going to start off with the intro. There's a ton of left and right delay here, and I just transcribed the rhythm on guitar as freely. You can give it a listen, you could try to get real close to the record, but it doesn't sound like he's being strict with timing at all, even though the bass line that comes in the beginning is somewhat in tempo and predictable. Petrucci is just kind of like doing whatever. The most important thing is that you got the tremolo arm, the whammy bar, Floyd Rose or something like it to do these huge dives. And well, let's get into it. So the first note, he hits the A on the G string, 14th fret. He does a massive dive first, and then I have him hammering on to 15 after that because he's kind of doing a whammy bar as he's doing a whammy dip as he dives. It gives it this cool, wacky sound. Then over to F on the first string, 13th fret. And a similar deal here. As he pulls off, he does a quick whammy bar dive as well. It gives it that sound. Then we are back to the A, the 14th fret. Then another whammy bar dive as he picks the next note. There's a lot of that in this song. To do that, if you've got your hand positioned just right on the bar, you can kind of position it that so when your pick goes into the string, your hand is in the right place to push the bar down just enough. And there's a bigger vibrato before the next pull-off. So we're at the end of the first line. Then the next line, you're going to reposition your hand a little bit. That can all be done comfortably in 15th position. I'll do that again. And then finally the last phrase, always starting with the same deal. So at the end of the phrase, it sounds to me like there's a whammy bar flutter. Now, most guitars with the Floyd Rose like it, this should work. I happen to have, so I'm using 10s on my guitar, tuned to standard, of course. Using 9s or 10s, it should work, but also to minimize the kind of the tuning shenanigans that I run into, I also have, the springs are pretty tight in the back of this. I have 4 springs, so I don't get as much flutter out of it as I otherwise would with less springs. And if you have less springs in there, kind of lets the whammy bar be a little freer. I don't like the whammy bar to be so free myself, so I don't get a great flutter on this setup, but you won't hear much of it. But to do it, of course, he's got that open G that he pulled off to. You just depress the whammy bar and let it go. You might hear a tiny one, but again, if your tremolo system's set up a little looser than mine, you'll hear brrr, kind of lasting for a while. And then this also sounds really glorious with all the delay. There's a 4th fret harmonic that I'm hitting on the 2nd string, although it may actually just be feedback. I'm going down and up after hitting that harmonic, and then hitting the open E and doing a big massive dive. A lot of times if I do a massive dive with the open E, I'll actually flick it with my left hand because just giving my right hand a break. This way I don't have to concentrate on picking it. I can just concentrate on having that whammy bar go as far down as possible. Or in this case, he's pulling it back when that happens. So. And that is the end of your free time intro. Then the keyboard takes over and does a figure that's sort of a harmony to what the bass was doing. It's just keys for a whole line, so I don't have anything there. But letter C in the transcription, measure 30, very end of the first page if you're following along. I actually wrote out the bass line. So it's a little tricky to do on guitar because you're playing harmonics, and this is probably best done fingerstyle, but the closeness of the guitar strings make this a little harder than it is on bass. So without further ado, here is our bass line arranged for guitar. Now, I like doing this fingerstyle. It's probably being done the same way. You're going to assign one finger to one string. Thumb on 6, index on 5th string, middle on the next string, ring finger on the next string, so you have 4 strings in a row. And just be real careful about letting your harmonics ring. We've also got this 3/4 and 2/4 alternating, and then ending on 3/4. So the time signature is kind of funny here. I settled on this time signature. There's obviously no drums. I settled on writing it out this way because it's sort of got the least the least weird stuff. And I also have the open E happening at the beginning of the 3rd measure, as opposed to having like 3 measures of 3/4, 1 measure of 2/4. This, I think, reflects the accent pattern a little better. Those are the harmonics ringing, but my own is hitting the low E at the beginning as well. So. There's your first half, and then the second half, he's got B flat. So that's the whole bit happening on bass. Sounds pretty different on guitar, the octave up, but still pretty cool part. Repeats as is 4 times, and at the last time there's just a little slowdown and he only plays the beginning of it. Then you got some wind and rain, some windshield wipers for a little bit while we hang out. Then finally the bass and drums start kicking in the song for real. Still no guitar, but here's where you want to count. It's so easy to mess this count up, but it's 3 measures of 3, 1 of 2/4. So count to 3, 3 times, count to 2 once, you're ready for the guitar part. So here, this is a really cool, interesting pattern. Petrucci's playing, he's not playing on beat 1. And whenever I have a part like this with a rest, I always want to keep my timing real honest. I always do something for that rest, whether it's bopping my head, tapping my foot, moving a shoulder or something to make that, or even saying out loud, rest. It's an 8th note rest, and I usually just say rest quickly. If you're feeling the upbeats well, that'll get you right on time. Rest, 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 rest. But once you got that groove down, that actually takes you pretty far in this. So the guitar plays that low palm muted E, the low palm muted E power chord section 3 times. Keeping track by once is bass and drums, the next time guitar joins, and then 2 times with the keys. Most of the time when I'm playing along with the song or in a band and I've got repeats, I'm just kind of feeling the cues out. So pretty straightforward. You can feel the cues from the keys here. Then we're playing the exact same rhythm, just moving up to the higher E power chord with the low open E on the bottom. Same thing, rest. And we're rounding out the 2/4 measure just with this little very simple run here, B, C, E, F. Rest. That goes twice, then verse 1 begins for real, and you go back to the low E, but it's the same exact riff rhythmically, and instead of hitting B, C, E, F up here, you're just doing it down here because that's where your hand is. Rest. Back up to the high E, and still the same thing twice. Now we have this little 3-4 measure and the 2 hits. 1, 2, and 3. Pay close attention here when we're playing Dream Theater. You can't just zone out when you're looking at the tab and assume it's a regular old power chord like we've talked about a lot with the other songs. Got a D power chord, and then that reinforced F power chord where the root is actually on the D string, and we're getting the 5th of the chord, low 5th of the chord on the A string here. Then we are on pre-chorus 1. This is one of my favorite riffs of the song. Cool progression, really neat vocal melody over it too. So we just got a B sus2. Then we've got a G chord with B in the bass. So, and you notice these chords are really super similar. What's basically happening is you're taking the higher part of the B sus2 and going up a half step. Now you could play it with a wild stretch like this, but I'm actually using, if you know your caged system, I'm using the D shape with a 3rd on the bottom on the 6th string. That makes it much easier. Got a pretty straightforward rhythmic pattern here. If you've made it this far on the record, this is no problem for you. Then F with open A in the bass. Now doing the opposite, moving it down so you get A sus2. And of course landing on Petrucci's favorite G5. This nice little B minor run. This can be, you want to strictly alternate pick this so you stay really nicely in time. A little bit of a pain because that last E of the run, you got to do outside picking for that. And at this speed, that can be a little hairy. But still not too bad. So that repeats exactly as is. Watch out for your second ending after you hit the G. So he's ending with this little run going up. Like this little E harmonic minor run. And then we're finally resolving back to E. And we're doing a very similar riff to what we did before, but now the guitar part is moved 1/8 note earlier, so you're actually starting on the downbeat of the measure. Oh, I should have mentioned, this is what the bass and drums are playing in the intro and the first, I believe the first verse also. So when you do come in with that guitar part, you have to realize that you're not syncing up with the bass and drums here in the first part. Here, of course, you are. Actually, I don't know if they're doing the opposite here. I'm only very focused on the guitar and playing in time. There's something very similar in Pull Me Under, where the snare drum is going a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, and hitting a 16th right before the downbeat and on the downbeat, while the guitar is doing 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and. The effect is one snare hit by itself, guitar and snare line up, and then one guitar hit by itself. So kind of similar in that first verse. But now we're on verse 2, where, as I said, the guitar is on the downbeat. Oh, well, we're measure 70. We're going to lead into verse 2 very shortly, but it's essentially the same riff, even with the same B, C, E, F deal. 1, 2, 3. I just watched for the middle E to low E in that one measure, but not a huge deal. Then we are at verse 2 in earnest. So here we go. Now the same rhythm pattern where we're playing on the downbeat. We got what's usually most accurately described as G first inversion, the minor 6th on B. Watch out in this first ending. It's 1, 2, and 1, 2, and 3. The hit for the second chord is right at the halfway point of the measure, the upbeat of 2. Then repeat. The chords are reversed, but the timing is also different. 2 beats and 1 beat now. Totally not rocket science so far. Now the next part of the verse, we're just like the first verse where we're alternating between the low E power chord and the high one, jumping up to the high one here. So watch out, we got a 5/8 measure. Just count it as a quick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When you're going from the time signature denominator being a 4 to an 8, usually it means you can count the pulse twice as fast for that measure. That's an easy way to not get intimidated by, my God, both numbers are changing. So from the measure before that, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And since everything is an eighth, it shouldn't be too hard to keep track of that. Now, both the drums and the vocals are doing something I didn't really bother analyzing rhythmically what's going on there, but on the repeat, the drums and the vocals are doing something kind of weird, but if you just keep it real steady, your second repeat will be the same exact, your second repeat, guitar's playing the same thing, of course, with a different ending. So the second time, so you've got that arpeggiated bit, then the two power chords, and with the hit on the upbeat of 2. And then you're on pre-chorus 2, which is essentially identical to pre-chorus 1, except the way it begins. The previous feel of the dotted quarter note kind of hangs on to this, and it's cool because the vocal melody goes along with it. So coming out of the last verse into here, and then pre-chorus 2 is the exact same thing. Finally, we get to the chorus. Chorus, pretty straightforward 16th note bit here. If you have trouble keeping them really nice and tight, remember, down picks for 16th notes like this, down picks on the downbeat, on the and, really try to feel the bigger groups. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a... Try to feel how they go in with the beat. Don't just spaz out, because it'll sound a mess. So real straightforward in terms of left hand here. We got middle E, open E. I'm using index finger for C and using index finger for D. So in that measure, what is this? In the first ending, second measure. 1, 2, 3, 4, and is the change to the E, and then at the beginning of the next measure, the downbeat is the F on the 8th fret, using pointer ring pinky. So this way, the rest of the first ending, I can just grab that power chord without moving. And then you got your first ending. I'm putting this run back down here because live, it looked like Petrucci is always doing this run at the very end of the first ending. It was the same run we had before in B minor, just up a fourth in E minor, and I believe he's always doing it here. It's possible he's just moving up to 7th fret here, since his hand was right there, but I've got it there, but it's the same exact run. Instead of starting on 2, start at 7. But anyway, the second time of chorus 1, of course, first 3 measures are the exact same thing. And by this point in the record, if you've been playing every song, also kudos to you, but at this point in the record, you should be pretty good at doing this 2 notes per string deal. This is one of the harder ones because not only is it a little faster, but it's just kind of the pattern that he uses to move over the strings is a little tricky. But first, think about what's going on here musically. It's a C power chord, like a 3-note C power chord. Now you could think of it as like a C sus2 once you hit the D on 12th fret here. But that actually, by keeping my hand in the same place, it might make it a little trickier. So what you can also do is kind of treat it like a C power chord. And then like you've got that extra D note, and then you're going to just an octave higher C power chord. What's cool about this is it prepares you for the next one. Either way is acceptable. I didn't get a good look how Prechorus doing this one live. But either way is fine, and then you're going to do the same exact thing starting on 10th fret, so D. Then you're going to do the same thing one more time on 13th fret on F. So if you're thinking about it this way, you're starting on 8, going up a whole step, and then going up 3 frets, or a minor third. The last one on F. He's also ending with the open E, which gives his hand time to move to the power chord, the A and C power chord at the end of this ending. And then we've got a similar run to the one before, but basically just E harmonic minor. Rhythmically, watch out for the triplet at the end. 2 E and a 3 E and a triplet. So here's the whole second ending right on it. That brings you to what I'm calling the breakdown. Starting off with that pattern, but you better be paying attention. Of course, this is Dream Theater, so you know to be paying attention here. We're starting like the riff that we did for verse 2, but there's a 2/4 measure and then the little whole tone scale run. So don't let that creep up on you. 2 and right into the run. Now, interesting thing about the whole scale, it's sort of like diminished arpeggios. Or even the diminished scale. There's so many different ways to play it because you're just playing whole steps. So at some point you got to decide what goes on what string. Good live footage of this. I was able to see where Prechorus playing it. On the record, there are 2 different guitar parts in harmony, and I think the keyboard is playing a 3rd part. Live, Prechorus plays a lower part, and I don't remember off the top of my head where he starts his run, but I kind of split the difference there, and I'm giving you the lower part played on the record, so just starting on E. Now, the weird thing about how he's phrasing it makes it a little bit hand awkward, but not too bad, is he's got the first 3 notes of the whole tone scale, and if you don't know, the whole tone scale is just all whole steps. It's only 6 different notes instead of our normal scales, which are 7 different notes, because we eliminated those 2 half steps. So the first part's pretty easy. You're doing that the 2 whole step shape on E string, and to keep that up, just move up 1 fret and you're golden on the next string. So far, so good. But after you've finished the notes on the D string, for going back up, then things get a little weird and you got a lot of choices. You could go up 1 more half step and continue, but Prechorus doesn't want to do that. Probably because he wants to keep his hand in relatively the same place. He only hits 1 note on the G. Then he proceeds to move down 1 fret and finish off the run. So I'll do it kind of slow. The other thing, in other songs I've talked about this, it's kind of one of my big things as a guitar teacher. When you have this pattern of 2 whole steps in a row, it's totally cool if you prefer using middle finger in the middle, on the middle note, instead of ring finger. It kind of has to do with how flexible parts of your hand are, how you like to hold your hand within reason is still good technique. I tend to have my fingers very, very parallel to the frets when I'm doing a lick like this. So naturally for me, the pinky stretch is much better than that index finger stretch. However, I kind of do both here. So I start with my usual ring finger in the middle. But now when I hit that 1 note on the G string, my middle finger is already there, so I might as well use it. Then I'm in position to do the last 3 notes with middle finger in the middle. So it's kind of a rarer case where I'll do it both ways. I almost always do this, but again, there are those cases where it just makes more sense to use middle finger. So here's that run one more time. That's that. That moves you right on to the next riff, which I kind of still think is part of the breakdown. It's a nice little kind of E minor centered riff. A lot of times on the record, if you're hearing these arpeggiated notes, it might be, and this goes for at least the early Dream Theater stuff, there's a lot of times a clean guitar playing an arpeggio behind just a distorted power chord or something. But being that you're only one mortal, we can just play those arpeggiated notes on the distorted guitar. Still sounds pretty cool here in the case of D sus2. So the way I like to do this to make it very easy for left hand is good old E power chord with an open E. Then Then this 10th fret G power chord, I'll actually play with middle and pinky. And then I can do that pull off really easily. I'm not doing any like weird slide or something like that. I've noticed that students really avoid playing power chords with middle and pinky because it's just, oh man, my hand is just so used to playing it with pointer and pinky or with pointer and ring the way I usually teach it. But it's a huge payoff just getting a little extra used to using those two fingers for power chords. Of course, if you're a Megadeth fan or a Metallica fan, the songs that Dave Mustaine wrote, you may be used to the spider fingering where he alternates between playing power chords, good old-fashioned index and ring, and middle and pinky. Bonus for you Megadeth fans there. So anyway, middle and pinky on that power chord. Repeat that twice, nothing weird. The third time, after you hit your D power chord, we're just going to go for the harmonics on 7th fret, which happen to just complete that same D major chord. So, and then finally the last one. Live he plays the same thing the fourth time, but on the record he's got a little octave harmony here, so I chose the lower one. And then there's a glorious drum fill which leads you into the solo. So in terms of solos on this record, this is one of the harder ones, largely because it's got a really, really long, in my transcription I called it idealized, but it's got a kind of long section where there's just, or a lot of sections where it's, like we talked about before, this is the idea of what he wants to do, but he's just like shredding in this neighborhood. So we start out with a very melodic piece. So I like to use middle finger to start. So we're in A minor for the solo, by the way. I like to use middle finger to start on C. Little whammy bar shenanigans as you're sliding, which gives it that cool sound to the to the high B and the D. Whammy bar vibrato on 13. And if you didn't see, or I didn't discuss this in my previous videos, how can you tell if it's whammy bar vibrato? Well, when you vibrato normally, the sound of the string is only going up because you're bending and going back to normal. Our ear, as rock listeners, just kind of accepts this. But when you whammy bar with the bar, the central note is actually the target note, and if you're shaking it that way, and you're not using a blocked off bar, so you're actually hearing the note in the center, and the vibrato goes above and below it, which is actually more like vocal vibrato or vibrato on a wind instrument or something. But that's one of the giveaways. Also, it's usually a wider vibrato, but it just has a different quality to it. So now we got this next lick, and you'll notice that I have a whammy bar dive as he hits the note, sort of similar to what we did in the intro. To get this articulation really right, it's such a nice little sweet sounding part. To get this articulation right, as I said, we're diving the whammy bar as we hit two of the notes, the B and the F. Right after you've pulled off from F to E on 9th fret, you're going to slide right back to that note. So it gives it that sweet, really singy quality that Petrucci has on this solo. Then you just got... I don't like barring this part. Sometimes I will, but I got those 2 5s in a row. I like just sneak my index finger over so I don't have to bar, so I can get it nice and clean. So it's like a little arpeggio followed by a little melodic scale stuff. Then things are about to go a little bananas, so we've got the slide up to D. So, and also sonically, here's where we run into a problem on the record. Live, this this part that I called idealized is very much kind of whatever he's feeling for this run. Toward the end of this run, you can tell what he's doing. But first, leading into that measure 137, this actually is pretty predictable. Get pinky to the slide to D. And this is all about good hand positioning, good left hand technique. When you get to the D string, again, you can use middle or ring on that middle note. So by the time we're getting to that low E, I'm not really sure what's going on, but the runs leading up to that are pretty simple. Again, this isn't going to be super strict every time he plays it, but he's descending on what I like to call the shreddy patterns. This would be like the last A minor shreddy pattern. So he's just descending on that. And then I'm hearing F and E at the end as 3/8 notes. Gotta be honest, I have no idea what's happening there, but after listening to it about 1,000,000 times, I'm pretty sure that's it. Then he starts on one of his very, very palm muted runs. There's also a lot of delay on this solo, so this is the kind of thing where between everything going on sonically, it's very hard to pick out. So I've idealized it, but I've given you something to kind of latch onto. So just starting with a little chromatic run. Look, I know Petrucci likes to do those chromatic runs as kind of like shred filler almost. And then I have this part being somewhat diatonic A minor. But for lack of a better way to figure out what's happening in this, I did something that I think is pretty reasonable. Going up the A minor scale. Then there's definitely a hand position shift somewhere in here, as best I can hear it. And a little bit of chromatic nonsense to end this. Now, it's also possible Petrucci just decided to flail on the lower strings while he kind of moves from one place to the next. Still sounds pretty cool. It's part of rock and roll, so I'm cool with that. But starting at measure 140, now we've got something that really resembles something that's a little more rigid, a little more practicable. Even though on the record, live, he's not playing it this way exactly at all. So we've got a cool little pattern of sextuplets though, and this is pretty close to what he's doing on the record. So what's happening here? So he's got he's probably ignoring the key a little bit, kind of knowing where he wants to go. But we're just starting on 12th fret of the A string. And that's our 6-note pattern. Keep in mind, when you're looking at tablature and you're trying to learn a solo or a series of runs and stuff, where you break things up to practice them is extremely important, and it's not always obvious just by looking at the tablature. So for example, in this measure 140, you may be tempted to think that the first note on the D string belongs to the rest of the note on the D string. Timing-wise, yes, because they're all just fast, but phrase-wise, it doesn't, because that's the 6th note. So practice that like it's its own thing, the first 6 notes. Great practice to get that upstroke on that 6th note as well. So after you've done that first one, if you're paying close attention, you'll notice it's actually the same exact thing, just over a string. Twice in a row. Then you move over a string, and lo and behold, it's the same thing twice in a row again, carrying over the measure line. And this actually you can make out on the record, since he's getting on the higher strings, you can really start to hear what he's doing more and more. The next one, you'll notice there's a jump to 13th fret. And again, you're not looking at, in measure 141, you're not looking at the first note on the B string as belonging to the next. That's the end of the first run that you did, or the first run of that measure that you did. And then we're moving over and doing the same run, but in terms of phrasing, but now with ring finger instead of middle finger, because we're now kind of diatonic A minor. Then the next part, he's, again, this one, now we start to get into territory where it is played the same way live. So, or at least very similar. So you just finished with 10th fret, the D on the first string. Now you're ready to. Always when you're playing something with sextuplets or something, well, sextuplets especially, make sure that you really feel the triplets as you're playing it. So I'm gonna start. Let's say we got those runs all super solid. Now I'm going to start from the last sextuplet group in measure 141 and use index finger for that last E. Now this is going to set you up for something that's for a very logical run. So it's just playing some notes in A harmonic minor now, and with the open E in between. Ending with 2 bends on the high C, 20th fret. So a little faster. Right, a little faster than that. So, and that run in and of itself should actually make perfect sense. You got open E's, time to move your hand. One thing you may notice is I really like bending with my pinky. I don't kind of understand why anyone wouldn't like bending with your pinky once you get used to it, because now you have all 4 fingers. It's actually the least stress on your hand to bend, especially since I like to use 10s. Sometimes these bends on first string, especially down here, can be kind of hairy. But all 4 fingers. Although it's slow enough where if you really are a ring finger bender, you could probably move it there and then move it back for the next bit, because it's important. So we bent C, 20th fret, a whole step. Hangs into the first beat of measure 143. Now, I strongly suggest using ring finger on 19. Little half step up and down, but then your hand is ready to do another variation of one of Petrucci's favorite kind of licks on this record, where we're doing those fifths on the first 2 strings and sliding them around. Sliding around a little power chord. So this one's actually easier than some of the other ones because it's only a fifth. You don't have to adjust it. You don't have to do anything weird like we had in the last 2 tunes, where sometimes it's a fifth and then he's reaching up, or sometimes it's a fifth, sometimes it's a diminished fifth. Nope, just straight fifths here. Just make sure you follow along where the slides are up and down. The phrasing is a little funny, and in this solo I'm talking a lot about how to break things down and practice it in parts. This is a good one to start halfway through the measure, but give yourself a counting of 2. It's always important, even if you've got a phrase fast enough for a solo, if you want to get it exactly like they have on the record, solo, or whatever the part is, it's important that you're giving yourself a count in if it doesn't start on beat 1. Because even if you learn it really fast, if you're not feeling it right, it's going to be very hard to drop properly when you're playing along with the song. So if I give myself 2, 1 E and a 2 E and a. Oh, watch out for that weird string skip at the end. Talking to myself. 1, 2. And that slight weirdness at the end, you got to plan ahead for that. So make sure you get that bar down as you come out of that. 1, 2. Once you've done that, connecting these 2 licks is a little bit awkward because of how the timing works. But once you've got that, then you can just start with the next one, which is these kind of slightly awkwardly fretted blues lick. The key here is where I wouldn't usually use ring finger, I'm using ring finger, and that helps me work out this riff. So just pretty straightforward, 2 notes with a bend. Now you notice that 9th fret, that E sneaking in there, I'm using index finger for that, and then stretching my ring finger to 12. But once I've got ring finger on 12 on the D string, well, I've barred it on the G, the G and D. Once I've got 12 on the D string, then the last lick makes a lot of sense. Just a simple little blues lick here. So we got. Also, there's a slide. The transcription has the slides a little close, but after I've done that bend on 14, I'm sliding down and sliding right back up. I always think of this as, it's a cool thing to do, but it's always like a guitar player tick, where you'll notice them playing a solo somewhere. They might slide off and just slide to the exact same place. Sometimes explaining that to a student is like, well, why'd they slide if they're going right to the same place? But it sounds cool, right? That's what this is all about. So okay, we've got that blues lick. And you're just holding that last A for almost an entire measure. And then I've got B as in parentheses. Probably a mistake, probably a little noise that he did or didn't intend. Doesn't really matter. The important part here is we're getting to another part in the solo where we want to have the same idea. You want to make sure you're counting and feeling the measures right. so everything kind of lines up properly. But I wouldn't go super nuts about being strict to have the exact same notes. Once again, in measure 147 and 148, you'll see my tremolo picking lines, which mean Petrucci's got his right hand on spaz mode, and he's just kind of playing fast-ish stuff on left hand. But the pickup to 147 that's where we're first bending that 12th fret, and it comes in on, I'm going to ignore the rest of the measure, comes in right on beat 4. Again, give yourself a count in so it feels right. 1, 2, 3. So far, so good. And then this is just a little like a harmonic minor thing. Harmonic minor meaning a sharp 7. The key of A minor has no sharps and flats, so that means it's going to be all natural notes except for G sharp to give us harmonic minor. And I'm basing my hand around G sharp here, the 9th fret. So I can get just kind of licks in this family. A little rondo a la Turk for you there, but yeah, that's the idea of what he's doing. But now, in terms of playing it fast, most important what you want to do is keep time with where you are. So from the pickup to 147, 1, 2, 3. And notice that you're basically just jamming on the B string for the last beat of 147 and the first 2 beats of the next measure. Then you're going to move over, and since this is the same kind of deal, we're basically moving down on the G string in A minor for the first 2 beats. So again, it's mostly about keeping track of where you are beat-wise, right? 1, 2, 3. Then, when you get to the beginning of the next measure, we do have a discernible pattern here. So that I would try to get exactly as they have. It's a worthwhile pattern. This one's good for you inside pickers, or us inside pickers. I always found that more naturally, because you can upstroke that B on the 9th fret on D string. Then he's definitely moving, kind of doing this shredding progression as he moves his hand down. And he's got a definite destination, which we'll get to in a second. So we've gotten that little lick, and then he's moving down to 4th position. And again, I'm not going to take this super literally with a triplet and 2/16 and whatever. We're just trying to fill the space, but his destination is to end the lick like this. Then with a wang bar. You're in 4th position on the B string, doing that triplet-ish lick for 4, 5, 7. And then finally, you're going to go up and get that G sharp like we talked about A harmonic minor. Little whammy of our vibrato there. So from the pickup to 147, so I'll do that whole section. I'm just going to kind of do it my own way, keeping track of where I need to be and when I need to be there. 1, 2, 3. Your mileage may vary, but we're going to want to get something close to that. Now, on 3 and here, my rhythm, I'm trying to get really, really perfect. But again, we're still in the territory of just squeezing in a lot of notes. Now here's our tapping section. This tapping section is a lot easier than it looks, so I'm going to tell you exactly how to think about it before anything else. So we're still in the key of A minor, and it just so happens that in A minor, all the open strings are in key. That, of course, means all the 12th frets are in key. So this whole entire tapping section, his right hand is just going to be hitting 12th fret, almost like as a substitute for picking notes. But by tapping, you get that extra note. Now, if you're not used to tapping a lot and you have a little trouble with it, remember that the right hand note counts. So don't just flick the string like you would when you pick. Make sure you give it just a little bit of time inward, but you don't have to hold it super long because it all is pretty quick here. So the idea is he's going to go down the A minor scale, and it's very simple in terms of patterns. If you know what I like to call the boxy patterns, Actually, no, we're using the shreddy patterns here, so. We're just going to end up going down the entire A minor scale. Oh, one of those notes might be displaced to a different string, but doesn't matter. It's still pretty straightforward. So the thing is, we're starting on 5th and 8th fret. Then he's moving his hand up and doing just a little bit of a higher position in A minor, 10, 8, 7. And a lot of times he's doing one of these like almost double taps for his left hand phrase. So, but he's just, again, moving down the scale. When it's time to move to the B string, he's got, just know your scale here, 8, 6, 5 on the left hand. And as I said before, the tap is always going to be on 12th fret. Then when we move to the 3rd string, we want to move down 1 fret. And we got 5, 7, 7, 5, 4. We move to the 4th string and we have the 2 whole steps look. And he slides to B here before finishing the scale on the next string with 5th fret the D and 3rd fret C. So now the important thing here is, again, he's not being super strict with exactly how he's playing these licks, especially if you see him live. It's pretty free, but you want to make sure that you're changing in the right place. And essentially, he's changing on or about the 2nd beat of every measure, starting in measure 152. So we start halfway through 150. 1, 2. And he changes a little quicker. He changes on beat 3 on beat 4, on or about beat 4 in measure 153. And then on beat 2 in measure 154. So again, the licks themselves aren't super crazy rocket science. It's more about keeping track when to change. Essentially, I'm just doing like 2 or 3 descending, but with the tap in between. And I might change it up a little bit, just like he's doing. I may have 1 tap for all 3 notes. Maybe 2 taps for however many. 2 taps for all 3 notes. And this is kind of what I like to think of as like chaos tapping, where you know that everything you're going to do is going to sound cool, so just tap it however it works out with your hands. That's really the end of all the tough stuff in the solo. Then we just get a nice little melody near the end. So pick up into, usually I have a B flat in 154. That is certainly not a strict, oh, you got to hit B flat there. It's just a, and then the 12th fret on the G string, I also have in parentheses. Not really sure if that's meant to be there. It's really not important. The important note is right at the beginning of measure 155, that half step on E. And that's 4 beats, and at the last beat you let it go down a little bit, and then we have 1 and 2 in the next measure, 2 staccato notes followed by a pre-bend. So here's 155. Notice I'm also not playing the note at the end of the measure yet, because I'm thinking of that as its own phrase. How do I know it's a pre-bend in measure 156? Because remember earlier I talked about vibrato on a regular note only goes up. Well, if you hear the vibrato going up and down, it's either a whammy bar, or I didn't mention last time, it could be a pre-bend. You pre-bend up to pitch, and then your vibrato can be above and below. This is a very, very Marty Friedman thing to do, which is why when you hear Marty Friedman, sometimes people would think he's using a whammy bar. It sometimes has that sound. If you know the difference, you know it's not whammy bar, it's Marty. But we're here to talk about John. So then we've got, speaking of, as a very Marty move here, to hit a wrong note, E flat is not in the key, and just bend it into E. But very simple, straightforward melodic thing here. If you've made it this far, you don't need me to talk you through that at all. But the little triplet in measure end of 158. trills. Interestingly, if anyone knows how exactly he does this, because I cannot get my arm or body to do this, but if anyone knows, please drop me a comment and help me out. Because when you see John Petrucci do a vibrato, he'll, and this was before he was super jacked too, so that has nothing to do with it. So he'll actually get his hand in this weird position and shake his whole arm. I can do it a little bit, and somehow that'll allow his finger to really, the way he's shaking his arm gets his finger to do the trill. If you can do it, very cool, very awesome. I can't, I have no idea how that works. Instead, I'll actually put my hand out in front, and that really frees the tendons in your hand to be free. And then this way, I can really get a lot out of it. Probably can't go quite as fast, but I can get a lot of strength out of it too. I also like to use my these two fingers for trilling, but I can trill with every finger, but those are probably the best. And then finally we've got the 11th fret. No worries there. So then finally we've got the artificial harmonic on 9th fret. So it's a G sharp. As I've said in other videos, you want the right artificial harmonic. Make sure you're comfortable with where it is on the guitar, especially if you're practicing a particular solo. 9th fret on my left hand, normal note, but I notice on this guitar that G sharp is found, which is the whatever order harmonic, it's the major third. So it's just a little bit left of where my, of the bridge pickup. After you do the whammy bar dive, we're going right back into the pre-chorus. And this pre-chorus is almost identical to the others. However, there's one difference, and this goes with, it's really cool because it goes with the lyrics. My mind was a wreck from what I saw. On the word wreck, instead of starting only with the palm muted note, he actually starts that one phrase with the chord. That's 1, 2, 3, the fourth measure. Now you've got that run leading into chorus 2. Actually, the run led into chorus 1. I didn't go over it then. It's nothing too bad if you're a decent alternate picker. Make sure after the run you go back to a thinner string. Now, chorus 2 is essentially the same as chorus 1, but it just repeats 3 times instead of 2, and that same double picking bit is on the third ending instead of the second ending. So that's all exactly the same. You don't need me to go over that. The very end is also something we've seen before. It's that E harmonic minor run. Live, it's the very end is played a little bit differently, but on the record, it's just those 2 E power chords we saw from before. And that is all of the ones who helped to set the sun. Stick around, we got one left, which is just a matter of time.